Ancient cultures all faced the same profound mystery. Long before modern science, they crafted breathtaking stories to explain how everything began. We are about to journey through 30 of these creation myths from every corner of the world. You will discover how our ancestors imagined the universe born from a cosmic egg, shaped from the body of a slain giant, or spoken into existence by a divine word. We will see how gods molded humanity from maize, from clay, and even from divine blood. This is the ultimate exploration of our shared drive to understand existence. How does the very first story of creation from your own culture begin to shape your view of the world? Before light or land, there was only a single, silent ocean. This was none the primordial waters of chaos, an endless and undifferentiated sea of potential where nothing yet existed. From this profound nothingness, the first beings stirred into consciousness. They were the Ogdoad, 4 pairs of gods and goddesses, each representing a fundamental quality of the void. There was darkness and its counterpart, invisibility. There was the infinite expanse of water and its partner, formlessness. These deities were depicted with the heads of frogs and serpents, creatures of the deep and the hidden earth, perfectly symbolizing the raw, churning energy of pre-creation. Their coming together was not a physical act, but a merging of these primordial forces. In a great surge of creative power, their union stirred the waters of none, and from that chaos, the first solid thing pushed its way to the surface. A mound of fertile earth, known as the Benben stone, emerged from the endless waters. This was not just a hill, it was the very first land, the anchor for all existence. And upon this sacred mound, the sun god Autumn, who is also Ra, manifested himself. His appearance was the first dawn, the first moment of light separating from darkness, of order emerging from chaos. With his arrival, the silent universe found its voice, and the power of divine thought and spoken word began to shape the world as we know it. This Egyptian vision suggests that creation itself was an act of consciousness, a deliberate ordering of the formless through will and utterance. While the Egyptian gods brought forth order from silent waters, another civilization envisioned a far more violent and dramatic birth for the cosmos. In the ancient lands of Mesopotamia, the world began not with a quiet thought, but with a roaring cosmic war. The Sumerian epic, known as the Enuma Elish, tells of 2 primordial beings who existed before anything else. Apsu was the sweet, fresh water, and Tiamat was the vast, chaotic salt water. Their waters mingled together, and from this union, the first generations of gods were born. But these younger deities were loud and energetic, and their noise disturbed the deep, primordial slumber of Apsu. He grew furious, deciding the only way to find peace was to destroy his own children. Tiamat, however, was horrified by this plan to annihilate their progeny. Yet when one of the younger gods, learned of the plot, he acted first, striking Apsu down and establishing his own dwelling upon the fresh waters. This act of patricide sowed the seeds for an even greater conflict. Grieving and enraged by the death of her mate, Tiamat transformed. She was no longer a passive force of nature, but a vengeful, monstrous mother, creating an army of terrifying creatures to wage war against the younger gods. The divine assembly was thrown into a panic. No one among them dared to face her terrifying wrath. The solution came from a new generation. The god Marduk, endowed with immense power, stepped forward. He agreed to confront Tiamat, but only on one condition, that if he succeeded, he would be granted supreme kingship over all the gods. Desperate, they agreed. The ensuing battle was the ultimate clash of chaos and order. Marduk rode forth in his storm chariot, armed with winds, a net, and a mighty bow. He challenged the raging Tiamat to single combat. As she opened her colossal mouth to devour him, he forced the evil winds inside her, inflating her body until she could not close her jaws. He then shot a single arrow straight into her swollen belly, tearing her apart. With the primordial mother slain, Marduk set about the work of creation. He took her massive, lifeless body and, with a force beyond comprehension, split it into two parts like a giant clamshell. From one half he fashioned the dome of the heavens, and from the other he anchored the foundations of the earth. He established the stars, the moon, and the cycles of time. But the story was not yet over. The gods who had supported Tiamat had to be punished. Marduk executed her second husband, the rebellious god Kingu. Then, from the blood of Kingu mixed with earth, the gods created humanity. Our very purpose in this myth was to be servants, to toil upon the earth so that the victorious gods could live a life of leisure. This was a creation born from conflict, a universe literally carved from the corpse of a vanquished goddess, establishing a permanent hierarchical order between gods and mortals. Yet another ancient culture saw the universe begin not with water, but with a vast and empty void. This was the Greek concept of chaos, a yawning gap of nothingness where nothing was defined or solid. Out of this profound emptiness, the first three primordial forces emerged. Gaia, the solid and life-giving earth, rose up to form the foundation of all things. Then came Tartarus, the deep, gloomy pit that would become the underworld. And finally, there was Eros, the powerful force of procreative love and desire, the irresistible attraction that would set all creation in motion. Gaia, powerful and alone, gave birth to a partner equal to herself, Uranus, the starry sky. He enveloped her completely, and their union was incredibly fertile, producing the first mighty beings, the 12 Titans. But Uranus was a cruel and possessive father. He hated the children that followed the Titans, the monstrous Cyclopes and the 100-handed Hecatoncheires, and he forced them back into the dark body of the earth, imprisoning them within Gaia and causing her immense pain. Anguished and furious, Gaia devised a plan for revenge. She created a great, sharp-toothed sickle of adamant and appealed to her children for a champion. Only the youngest Titan, Cronus, was bold enough to answer. He lay in wait for his father, and when Uranus came to lie with Gaia, Cronus sprang forth. With one brutal swing, he castrated his father, seizing power and establishing his own rule. This violent act did more than just change the ruler of the gods. It physically completed the separation of sky and earth, creating the cosmic space in which life could flourish. But the cycle of violence was not over. Cronus, fearing a prophecy that he too would be overthrown by one of his own children, devoured each of them at birth. His wife, the Titaness Rhea, horrified, managed to save her youngest son, Zeus, by tricking Cronus into swallowing a stone wrapped in swaddling clothes. The hidden Zeus grew up in secret, and when he came of age, confronted his father. He forced Cronus to disgorge his siblings, and together, the new generation of gods waged a tremendous war against the Titans. This was the Titanomachy, a cataclysmic 10-year battle that shook the very foundations of the cosmos. Ultimately, Zeus and the Olympians were victorious, casting the defeated Titans into the abyss of Tartarus. With this final victory, Zeus established a new, more structured order for the universe, dividing dominion among his brothers and sisters. This was not a creation from a corpse or a word, but a cosmos forged through rebellion and struggle, a world where order was painfully won from the chaos of familial conflict. Far to the north, the Norse envisioned a beginning defined by elemental extremes. Before the world existed, there was only Ginnungagap, a vast and empty chasm of nothingness. To its south lay Muspelheim, a realm of searing, unbearable fire, and to its north was Niflheim, a land of biting, eternal ice. For ages, these two forces remained separate until the fires of Muspelheim began to send forth sparks and embers into the great void. These hot winds met the freezing rime and glaciers flowing from Niflheim, and in that incredible meeting of opposites, the ice began to melt. From those dripping, life-giving drops, a form slowly coalesced. This was Ymir, the first frost giant, a being of pure, chaotic power who was neither god nor man. As the ice continued to melt, it also formed Audhumla, a massive, gentle primeval cow. Her flowing rivers of milk nourished the giant Ymir, sustaining him as he slept. And what did Audhumla herself consume? She licked the salty, frost-covered blocks of ice that surrounded her. For 3 days she licked at one particular spot, and on the first day a man's hair emerged from the ice. On the second day his whole head was revealed. And on the third day an entire man, strong and powerful, emerged from the frozen prison. This was Beri, the very first of the Aesir gods, the grandfather of a dynasty that would change everything. Beri had a son named Bor, who married a giantess, and they had 3 sons, Odin, Vili, and Vi. These 3 brothers looked upon the savage, growing horde of frost giants that had spawned from the sleeping Ymir, and they saw only chaos and threat. They decided the only path to a stable cosmos was to slay the primordial giant himself. In a tremendous struggle, they overcame Ymir, and so much blood poured from his wounds that it drowned almost all the other frost giants, saving only 2 who had found a new lineage. Then the brothers set to work. They dragged Ymir's colossal body into the center of Ginnungagap and began to build the world from his remains. From his flesh they molded the earth. His unspilled blood became the oceans and all the lakes and rivers. They placed his bones to form the mountains, and his teeth and shattered jaw became the cliffs and stones. They took his skull and set it high above, creating the dome of the sky, with a dwarf stationed at each of its 4 corners to hold it aloft. Finally, they seized the sparks and embers from Muspelheim and threw them up into the celestial dome to become the sun, the moon, and all the stars. The world was literally built from the body of a slain giant, a physical testament to order being violently carved from chaos. Yet another ancient tradition approached the mystery of existence with profound philosophical doubt. The Rig Veda, one of the oldest texts known to humanity, contains a hymn of creation that is startlingly different from the others. It is called the Nasadiya Sukta, and it begins not with a triumphant declaration, but with a series of haunting questions. It asks what stirred where and in whose care was there water in the depths of unfathomable darkness. The hymn suggests that in the beginning there was neither existence nor non-existence, neither the realm of air nor the sky beyond. There was no death and no immortality. There was only the one breathing by its own power with nothing else at all. Darkness was hidden by darkness in that early time, the hymn says, and all was an indistinguishable sea. Then that one came into being through the power of heat, a primal tapas which can be thought of as intense, focused spiritual energy. But the hymn ends with ultimate uncertainty, stating that even the highest God in the highest heaven may not know from where this creation arose. He only knows if he does know. This is a creation story that dares to admit it might not have all the answers. Yet another hymn from the same era provides a more concrete, though equally profound, image. It describes a cosmic giant named Purusha, a primal being with 1,000 heads, 1,000 eyes, and 1,000 feet. He enveloped the earth on all sides and extended even 10 fingers beyond it. All of creation was merely 1/4 of him. His other 3/4 were immortal and in heaven. The gods themselves performed a great ritual sacrifice, binding the vast Purusha and offering him upon the sacred grass. From this cosmic offering, the entire universe was formed. Clarified butter, a sacred substance in rituals, was collected from him, and from it they made the creatures of the air and the wild. His mind became the moon, his eye became the sun. From his mouth came the god of fire, and from his breath the wind was born. The air came from his navel, the sky from his head, the earth from his feet, and from his ear the 4 directions. Every single part of the cosmos was fashioned from a part of him, and humanity, too, was born from this sacrifice. The 4 main social classes, known as Varnas, emerged from his body. The priests or Brahmins came from his mouth. The warriors and rulers, the Kshatriyas, were made from his arms. The merchants and farmers, the Vaishyas, sprang from his thighs. And the laborers, the Shudras, were born from his feet. This vision presents creation not as a battle or a thought, but as the ultimate sacred act, a dismemberment that gives life to everything, establishing a cosmic and social order that is intrinsically interconnected. Across the Pacific, an equally monumental act of creation was taking shape, not from a giant's corpse, but from within a single cosmic egg. For 18,000 years, the universe existed as this perfect, unbroken orb, a swirling mass of undifferentiated chaos where all the elements of creation were perfectly blended together. And within this egg slept the giant Pangu, curled in peaceful slumber, growing steadily alongside the primordial universe. When he finally awoke, he found himself in absolute darkness, surrounded by the formless chaos. He stretched his immense limbs, and with a single, mighty blow from a giant axe that had formed alongside him, he cleaved the egg in two. The heavy, dark elements, the essence of yin, sank down to form the earth. The light, clear elements, the force of yang, floated up to become the sky. But the two halves were not yet stable. They threatened to collapse back into each other, to return to that single, chaotic state. So Pangu, in an act of incredible endurance, placed himself between them. He stood upon the earth and pushed the sky upwards with his hands and head. Each day, the earth grew 10 feet thicker, and the sky rose 10 feet higher, and Pangu grew 10 feet taller to keep them separated. For another 18,000 years, he held this colossal pose, a living pillar between heaven and earth, until the two realms were finally fixed in their permanent places, 10,000 miles apart. Utterly exhausted by his cosmic labor, the giant Pangu finally lay down to rest, and he died. But his death was not an end, it was the final act of creation. His breath became the wind and the drifting clouds, his voice transformed into the rolling thunder, his left eye rose into the sky to become the brilliant, warming sun, while his right eye became the gentle, silvery moon. His body and his limbs formed the great mountains and the 5 sacred peaks of China. His blood flowed out to become the rivers and the lakes. His veins became the paths that crisscrossed the land, and his muscles turned into the fertile soil. The hair on his head became the stars in the night sky, and the fine hair on his body blossomed into the grasses and trees of the world. Even the fleas and parasites that lived on him were transformed, carried by the wind to become the first human beings. In this myth, the entire world is not a battlefield but a sacred body, a testament to a single being's ultimate sacrifice to create and sustain an orderly universe. The world born from a giant's body is a powerful image, but the islands of Japan were said to have emerged from something far more delicate, a jeweled spear. In the Shinto tradition recorded in the ancient Kojiki, the universe began with the spontaneous formation of Takamagahara, the plane of high heaven. Below it stretched a vast, formless ocean, and between them was nothing. Then the first 3 kami came into being. Kami are not simply gods in the Western sense. They are the sacred spirits that inhabit all things, from the grandest mountain to the smallest stream. These first 3 primordial kami gave rise to successive generations of deities, each helping to define the nature of the emerging cosmos. The pivotal moment arrived with the 7th generation, the divine pair Izanagi, the male who invites, and Izanami, the female who invites. The heavenly kami charged them with a monumental task to give solid form to the world below, to stir the chaotic brine into land. Standing upon the Aim no Yukihashi, the floating bridge of heaven, they looked down upon the swirling, oily sea. Izanagi lowered the Aim no Nuboko, a magnificent spear decorated with glittering jewels, into the waters below. He stirred slowly, the currents churning around the blade. When he lifted the spear back out, drops of salty brine fell from its tip. These drops did not dissolve back into the ocean. Instead, they coagulated and hardened, forming the very first island, Onogoro, the self-curdling island. This was the anchor, the foundation upon which everything else would be built. Izanagi and Izanami descended from the bridge of heaven to this newborn land. They erected a great pillar, the heavenly pillar, and built a palace around it. Recognizing their differences, they decided to perform a marriage ritual. They walked in opposite directions around the pillar, and when they met, Izanami, the female spirit, spoke first, greeting her counterpart. They united, but their first children were born deformed, a leech child and a floating island. They cast these imperfect creations adrift, then consulted the other kami to understand what had gone wrong. The heavenly deities explained that the fault lay in the ritual, for the woman had spoken first, upsetting the natural order. So they returned to the heavenly pillar and performed the ceremony again. This time, when they met, Izanagi spoke first. Their union was then blessed, and they began to give birth to the world. They became the parents of the 8 main islands of Japan, and then of a multitude of other kami, the spirits of the wind, the mountains, the trees, and the plains. Every feature of the landscape was a divine child, born from the sacred marriage of the male and female who invited the world into being. This act of naming and singing the landscape stands in beautiful contrast to the creation born from a jeweled spear. In the vast, ancient lands of Australia, the very fabric of reality was woven not by a single act, but through an eternal, living story known as the Dreamtime. This is not a time long ago that has ended. The dreaming is the sacred, ever-present dimension of reality, the foundation of all life and law. In the beginning, the world was a flat, plain, and featureless place. Then the ancestor spirits awoke. They emerged from the depths of the earth and descended from the empty sky, taking forms both human and animal. There was the rainbow serpent winding its way beneath the surface. There was the emu ancestor and the kangaroo man. These beings did not merely walk upon the land, they created it through their epic journeys. As they traveled across the continent, every step they took, every action they performed, left a permanent mark on the world. A great battle might carve out a valley. A spear thrown could become a long, rocky ridge. Where they stopped to rest, their bodies formed hills and mountains. Where they dug for water, springs and rivers bubbled up. But the most profound tool of creation was their song. The ancestor spirits sang the world into existence. They sang the names of every plant and animal, every rock and waterhole, calling them forth into being. The vibrations of their sacred songs pulsed through the land, giving it form and meaning. Their journeys established the songlines, invisible pathways that crisscrossed the entire continent, a living map and a record of creation. But their work did not stop with geography. The ancestor spirits also established all the laws, ceremonies, and social customs for the people who would one day inhabit the land. They taught how to live in balance, how to hunt and gather respectfully, and how to perform the rituals that would keep the world in harmony. When their work of creation was complete, the ancestors did not simply die, they transformed. Some sank back into the earth, their spirits remaining in the very features they had created. Others became the stars in the sky. This means that every part of the land is alive with sacred power, a constant reminder of the ancestors and their ongoing presence. For indigenous peoples, to know the songs and the stories of the dreaming is to maintain the world itself, to walk in the footsteps of the creators and keep the connection between the people and the land forever strong. The thought of the gods alone was enough to bring forth the earth from a timeless sea. Far from the icy Norse realms and the songlines of Australia, the Maya of Mesoamerica envisioned a beginning of profound silence. There was only a placid, empty sea beneath a vacant sky. Then came the presence of the gods, heart of sky, and the plumed serpent. They did not fight or sacrifice themselves. They simply gathered in the darkness and consulted with one another. They thought, and in that act of thought, the possibility of mountains and trees emerged. They spoke the words earth and mountain, and the land immediately rose up from the watery void, separating itself from the sky. Rivers began to run, and pine forests spread across the slopes. It was an act of pure intellectual and verbal creation, a universe born from divine conversation. But the gods had a very specific desire. They wanted creatures who could speak their names, who could offer them praise and worship. So they began a series of experiments, a divine trial and error to create the perfect vassal. Their first attempt was the animal kingdom. They fashioned the deer, the birds, the jaguars, and the snakes. But while these creatures could cry and hiss and roar, they could not form the words of praise the gods longed to hear. They could only squawk and chatter in their own tongues. This was a failure. The gods then tried a different material. They decided to make beings out of mud. These mud figures could indeed speak, but their words were nonsensical and garbled. They were physically weak as well, dissolving in the rain and crumbling back into the earth. They could not even turn their heads to look at the sky. Dissatisfied, the creators washed them away in a great flood. The third attempt was even more disastrous. The gods fashioned people out of wood. These wooden mannequins looked human and they could walk and talk. They even reproduced and populated the earth, but they had no hearts, no minds, and no memories. They were empty vessels, unable to remember their creators or offer any genuine gratitude. They simply wandered the earth, purposeless. The gods were furious at this hollow creation and sent a terrible punishment. They called upon the household objects to rise up against their masters. The grinding stones crushed them, the cooking pots burned them, and the animals tore them apart. A thick, black resin poured from the sky, and the few survivors were hunted down, their faces wiped away. This entire saga of failure sets the stage for the epic of the hero twins, a story deeply woven into the creation of true humanity. The gods needed a pure substance, something sacred and sustaining, to finally succeed. They would use maize, the golden corn that was the very foundation of Mayan life. But the path to that perfect maize was guarded by the lords of the underworld, and it would take two divine brothers, Hunahpu and Expalank, to clear the way. This narrative of divine sacrifice to create humanity finds a terrifying echo in the story of our own world's violent birth. The Aztecs believed that our existence is not the first, but the fifth in a series of doomed creations, each one a world called a sun. Before our time, 4 previous worlds had been born, flourished, and then met catastrophic ends. The first sun, ruled by the god Tezcatlipoca, was a world of giants. It was destroyed when jaguars devoured the sun, and the giants were hunted and eaten. The second sun, governed by Quetzalcoatl, was wiped away by a great hurricane that swept everyone from the earth. The third sun, under the rain god Tlaloc, ended in a storm of fire that rained from the sky. The fourth sun, belonging to the water goddess Chalchutlicue, was washed away in a colossal flood that turned the people into fish. Each of these eras was a failed experiment, a cosmos that could not sustain itself. The gods knew that to create a stable world, a fifth sun, they would need to offer the ultimate price. The stage for this final act was the sacred city of Teotihuacan, the place where the gods gathered in darkness. A tremendous, sacred fire was built, and the divine assembly declared that a god must leap into the flames to become the new sun. 2 deities stepped forward. The first was Tecusistecatl, a proud and wealthy god, adorned in fine jewels and quetzal feathers. The second was Nanahuatzin, a humble, poor god who was covered in sores and dressed in simple paper garments. Tecusistecatl, full of arrogance, approached the blazing pyre first, but the heat was so intense, so terrifying that he recoiled in fear. He tried 4 times to jump, and 4 times he failed. Then it was Nanahuatzin's turn. Without a moment of hesitation, the humble god closed his eyes and threw himself resolutely into the heart of the fire. Shamed by this act of courage, Tecusistecatl finally leaped in after him. From the ashes, 2 suns rose into the sky, but the gods were faced with a new problem. The suns, now embodied by Nanahuatzin and Tecusistecatl, hung motionless in the heavens, blazing with equal light. The world could not exist with 2 suns. One of the gods, enraged, seized a rabbit and hurled it at Tecusistecatl, dimming his brilliance and turning him into the moon. Yet even then, the sun refused to move. The gods realized a final, horrifying truth. The sun required nourishment, a sacred energy to fuel its journey across the sky, and that energy was the most precious substance in existence, the blood and hearts of humans. So the gods offered their own blood and later commanded that humanity, created from the ground-up bones of the previous races and the blood of the gods themselves, must continue this sacrifice. This established the central, chilling tenet of Aztec belief that the very cosmos was a fragile, hungry machine, and that the sun would only continue to rise each day if it was fed with the pulse of human life. High in the Andes, a different kind of creator god surveyed a world plunged into darkness. This was Viracocha, the supreme lord of the Inca, who rose from the sacred waters of Lake Titicaca when the earth was young and sunless. His first act was one of grand but flawed ambition. From the very stone of the land, he fashioned a race of giants. These colossal beings roamed the earth, but they soon proved to be a disappointment. They were unruly and failed to honor their creator, so Viracocha, in his displeasure, unleashed a great flood that swept most of them from the earth. The few who remained, he turned to solid stone. The Inca believed the massive, enigmatic ruins at Tiwanaku were the petrified remains of these first failed giants, a perpetual monument to a creator's wrath. With a slate wiped clean, Viracocha began his work anew. This time he started not with the earth but with the heavens. He breathed life into the sun, commanding it to journey across the sky and bring light and warmth to the world. He then set the moon and the countless stars in their places, establishing the cycles of day and night. Only then did he turn his attention back to the task of creating humanity. He took clay from the earth and with his own hands he sculpted new people. But this was not a single, homogeneous creation. Viracocha painted each group of figures with distinct clothing, and he gifted each with its own language, its own customs, and its own destination. He was not just creating people, he was creating nations. To complete this great dispersal, he sent these clay beings deep underground, instructing them to wait. They were to emerge from specific pacarinas, the sacred points of origin that dotted the landscape. These were not just caves or springs, they were wombs of the earth itself. From these pacarinas, the ancestors of every Andean community stepped forth into the light, already wearing the traditional dress and speaking the language that would define their people. This myth provided a divine mandate for the vast and diverse Inca Empire, explaining its many cultures and languages as all originating from the single, intentional act of Viracocha, the god who emerged from the lake to bring order from chaos and people from the earth itself. Yet another world was fashioned not from a giant's corpse or a divine word, but from a simple snail's shell and the patient work of a sculptor. In the Yoruba tradition of West Africa, the universe began with the supreme god Ogdoad, the source of all power and purity, who dwells in the sky far above the affairs of the emerging world. Below him existed a pantheon of divine spirits known as the Orishas, each possessing unique abilities and domains. Among them was Obatala, the god of clarity, creativity, and purity, who was given the most sacred of tasks. Ogdoad presented Obatala with a chain of gold, a single snail shell filled with loose earth, and a 5-toed hen. Obatala's mission was to descend from the heavens and create solid land in the vast, empty ocean below. He climbed down the golden chain until he hung just above the endless, churning waters. There, he carefully poured the contents of the snail's shell onto the surface of the sea. The loose earth spread out, floating precariously. Then he released the 5-toed hen. The bird immediately began to scratch and scatter the earth, stretching it and spreading it in all directions until it formed a wide, stable expanse of land. This place became known as Isle Ife, the sacred city, the birthplace of the world and all of humanity. With the land secured, Obatala set to his next great work. He gathered clay from the earth of Isle Ife and with his divine hands began to carefully mold the first human figures. He shaped each one with patience and artistry, forming the bodies that would become the first people. But these clay sculptures were inert, empty vessels. They lacked the vital spark of life. Obatala then called upon Olajumer, the supreme source. Olajumer leaned down from the heavens and breathed his sacred breath, known as Emi, into each of the clay forms. With that breath, the figures stirred, their eyes opened, and they rose up as the first living human beings. This partnership established a profound duality in creation, where the physical form was crafted by one deity and the immortal spirit was bestowed by another, a beautiful collaboration between the sky and the earth. But the act of creation was not always a violent struggle or a grand sacrifice. In the lush, fertile lands of southern Africa, the Zulu people tell of a beginning that unfolds with a quiet, organic growth. It all started in Athlanga, a vast and primordial swamp whose name itself means the source of all things. This was not a place of chaos or emptiness, but a thriving bed of life, a great marsh teeming with reeds. And from within this dense thicket, the first being simply grew. He was Unkulunkulu, the Great One, the Ancient One, who sprouted like a seed into full consciousness. He matured there in the heart of the swamp until he reached a point of profound self-awareness. He broke himself off from the great bed of reeds, emerging as a separate, complete being. And as he did so, his separation was an act of creation itself. He brought forth the first men and women from the reeds. He pulled cattle from the reeds. He drew out every manner of animal and plant, each one emerging from that same fundamental source. Unkulunkulu was not a distant celestial god, but a progenitor who walked among his people. He taught them everything they needed to thrive in the world he had brought them into. He showed them how to hunt for their food, how to kindle a flame for warmth and cooking, and how to live together in a harmonious society. He established the laws of marriage, the customs of kinship, and the very foundations of Zulu culture. In this myth, creation is a gentle unfolding, a natural progression from a single, life-giving source, where humanity is not molded from clay or born from blood, but is intimately and directly connected to the very reeds of the earth. That same sorrow of separated parents echoes across the ocean in the creation story of the Maori. Here, the cosmos began as a closed, suffocating space. The Sky Father, Rangi, and the Earth Mother, Papa, lay locked in a tight and loving embrace. Their union was so complete that no light could penetrate the darkness between them. In that cramped, shadowy world, their many children were forced to exist, curled up in the confined space between their parents' bodies. These were not ordinary children. They were the powerful Atua, the gods of the forest, the sea, the winds, and of war. They lived in perpetual night, unable to stretch their limbs or see one another, growing increasingly frustrated and desperate for room to breathe and light to live by. The children gathered to debate their fate. How could they free themselves from this loving prison? Most of the gods were afraid to act, fearing the consequences of hurting their parents. The fierce god of winds and storms, Toherimatia, argued passionately against any separation, horrified at the thought of tearing his family apart. But the god of the forests and all living things, Tain Mahuta, saw no other way. He proposed that they push their parents apart, forcing Rangi into the sky to become the heavens and leaving Papa below to become the earth. One by one, his brothers tried and failed. The god of cultivated food pushed with his hands but could not move them. The god of wild foods and the god of the sea both tried with their immense strength, but the bond between Rangi and Papa was too strong. Finally, it was Tain Mahuta's turn. He did not stand and push with his arms. Instead, he placed his shoulders upon the Earth Mother, Papa, and planted his feet firmly against the Sky Father, Rangi. Then, slowly and with immense steady pressure, he began to straighten his legs. He pushed and pushed, his muscles straining against the primordial embrace. With a great, groaning cry of rending flesh and breaking bonds, he forced his parents apart. Light flooded into the world for the very first time. The children were free, and the spacious world we know was born. But this victory came with a profound and lasting sorrow. Rangi was lifted high into the sky and Papa remained below, forever separated from her beloved. To this day, their grief is a visible part of the world. The mist that rises from the deep forests is the sigh of Papa, longing for her husband, and the rain that falls from the sky is the endless weeping of Rangi, mourning for his wife. Their children, the gods, now live in the space between, forever reminding us that creation is often born from a heartbreaking, necessary sacrifice. The grief of separated parents gives way to a creation born from a single, vibrating seed. In the lands of Mali, the Dogon people hold a creation story of breathtaking complexity and startling astronomical precision. It begins with the creator god, Amma, existing in a void. His first act was to fashion a tiny seed, the germ of the entire universe, which he set spinning. This seed vibrated with such immense energy that it expanded, and from its core, Amma created a cosmic egg. This was not a simple orb, but a perfect, self-contained system of twin placentas, each holding a set of twin beings. The egg split, and from it emerged the Nommo, divine, amphibious beings who were half human and half fish. These twins were perfect, androgynous reflections of the Creator himself, embodiments of order and fertility, yet creation was soon marred by rebellion. One of the twin Nommo, representing the male principle, saw the emptiness of the universe and desired to possess the entire cosmic egg for himself. He began to spin prematurely, tearing a piece of his placenta to use as the earth. This act was a catastrophic violation of the divine order, a theft of the very substance of creation. It introduced imperfection and chaos into a world that was meant to be perfect. To restore balance and purify the universe he had disrupted, Amma was forced to take drastic action. He sacrificed the other Nommo twin, the one who had remained pure. This divine being was dismembered, and his body was scattered across the world. Each fragment served to cleanse and sanctify the earth, bringing back a measure of the order that had been lost. This act established the foundational rituals of sacrifice that would become central to Dogon's spiritual life. But the most astonishing part of their myth was yet to come. The Dogon believed that the Nommo were celestial teachers who came to earth from the stars. They claim these amphibious gods gave them incredibly detailed knowledge about the star system Sirius, which they call the center of the universe. Long before modern telescopes confirmed it, Dogon priests spoke of a tiny, incredibly dense companion star orbiting Sirius, a star they called Potolo. They knew this invisible star was made of a metal heavier than iron, and they accurately described its 50-year elliptical orbit. How could a people without advanced instruments possess such precise astronomical data? Their answer is simple and profound, the Nommo told them. This myth weaves together the spiritual and the scientific into a single, unified vision of a cosmos born from sound, broken by pride, and redeemed by sacrifice, all under the watchful eye of a distant, dancing star. While the gods of Sumer carved the world from a slain mother's body, a later Babylonian epic reveals a creation born not from cosmic war, but from a labor dispute. This is the story of the Atrahasis, a text that delves into the gritty, almost mundane reason for our own existence. In the beginning, the great gods, the Anunnaki, had a problem. The hard, tedious work of the universe was piling up. They needed to dig the beds for the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, they needed to till the land, and they needed to maintain the very fabric of the world. So they assigned this backbreaking toil to a lower class of deities, the Ijigi gods. For 40 long years, the Ijigi labored under the scorching sun, their divine hands calloused and sore. They dug and they hauled while the high gods reaped the benefits of their endless toil. The resentment among the Ijigi grew with each passing season, a slow burning fury that finally reached its breaking point. They decided they would serve no more. In a powerful act of collective defiance, they set their tools on fire. Shovels, picks, and baskets were thrown into a massive, roaring bonfire. Then, armed with the flames of their rebellion, they marched. They surrounded the grand house of Enlil, the king of the gods, sealing him inside. The divine order was on the verge of complete collapse. The high gods were terrified. They called an emergency council, but no one knew how to resolve the crisis. Enlil demanded punishment, but the other gods saw the justice in the Ichigi's complaint. It was the clever god E, known for his wisdom, who proposed a brilliant and permanent solution. He stood before the assembly and suggested they create a new being, a creature who could take on this divine burden. The mother goddess, Mami, also called Nintu, was given the task, but what substance could hold the weight of such a destiny? E had a specific recipe. A god would have to be chosen, one who possessed the divine essence necessary for the task, yet whose sacrifice would not disrupt the celestial hierarchy. The god Illa was selected. He was slain, and from his flesh and blood mixed with pure clay, Mami began her work. She pinched off the mixture, shaping the first 7 human pairs. This was not a gentle act of sculpture, but a deliberate manufacturing of a labor force. Humanity was born from the blood of a sacrificed god, and the earth itself, created for one explicit purpose: to bear the toil, the lulu, that the gods found so unbearable. Our very existence in this stark myth is the direct result of a divine strike, a permanent replacement for a workforce that refused to work another day. This cosmic struggle between order and chaos finds a stark and moral clarity in the ancient Persian vision of creation. Zoroastrianism presents a universe born from a fundamental choice between 2 opposing forces. In the very beginning, time itself was not linear but eternal. There existed 2 primal, uncreated spirits, twins who were defined by their choices. One was Ahura Mazda, the wise lord, a being of boundless light, infinite wisdom, and pure goodness. The other was Angra Mainyu, the destructive spirit, whose essence was darkness, deceit, and a drive to annihilate. Their first and most important act was a choice. Ahura Mazda chose Asha, which is truth, order, and righteousness. Angra Mainyu chose Drudge, the lie, chaos, and destruction. This initial, eternal decision split reality into 2 opposing camps. Ahura Mazda, from his luminous nature, first fashioned a perfect spiritual creation. This was a world without form, without suffering, without time, a radiant and ideal prototype of existence. But the wise lord, in his omniscience, knew that Angra Mainyu would inevitably attack this perfection. So he set a boundary, a period of 12,000 years, and within that time he created the material world. This earth, with its mountains and rivers, its plants and animals, was not the first perfect creation. It was designed to be a fortress, a battlefield where the forces of light and darkness could finally meet and contend. He fashioned the sky as a stone shell, the earth as a flat disk, and the plants, animals, and finally, the first human, Gaimard, from the very substance of the earth, infused with his divine light. For 3,000 years, Angra Mainyu could not penetrate this material fortress. He was repelled by its purity and the brilliance of Ahura Mazda's design. But his malice festered, and he eventually found a point of weakness. He drilled in from the void, bursting into the world through the sky, and his invasion was a torrent of corruption. He poisoned the perfect fire with smoke. He salted the fresh waters. He brought forth thousands of diseases and created noxious creatures like snakes, flies, and wolves. He killed the primordial bull, whose body then gave rise to all beneficial animals, and he struck down the first man, Gaimard, from whose seed would eventually spring the first human couple. This was not a final victory for darkness, but the beginning of the long war. Humanity, born from the seed of Gaimard, carries a sacred duty within this struggle. Every person is a soldier in this cosmic conflict. Our purpose is to actively choose the side of Ahura Mazda, to live by Asha, to tend the land, to care for animals, and to fight against the lies and decay introduced by Angra Mainyu. This myth offers a profound and demanding vision. The universe is not a peaceful creation, but a contested one. Evil is not an illusion or a mere absence of good, but a real active force. And our every action, every thought, and every word becomes a vote in this eternal battle, a contribution toward the final renewal of the world at the end of time. Ireland itself has its own layered saga of arrivals and disappearances, a chronicle of successive worlds. The Leber Gabála Érenn, the Book of Invasions, recounts this epic history not as a single creation, but as a sequence of waves, each one washing over the island and leaving its own distinct mark before receding into myth. The first to arrive was a woman named Cessair, granddaughter of the biblical Noah. She led a group to Ireland, believing it to be a sanctuary from the great flood that was coming. But their refuge became a tomb. The waters rose as prophesied, and Cessair and all her people were utterly wiped away. After the deluge receded, a new wave arrived, led by a man named Partholon. His people were the first to truly shape the land. They cleared 4 great plains, making the wilderness habitable, and they established the first ale-making and hospitality. Yet after 300 years, their entire population was struck down by a mysterious, swift-acting plague, leaving the land empty once more. Next came the Nemedians, who faced a far more active and terrifying enemy. They struggled to build a life while under constant siege by the monstrous Fomorians, shadowy, piratical giants who demanded cruel tribute. After years of conflict and a great battle, the Nemedian survivors were scattered to the winds. The following wave was the Fir Bolg, a people who are said to have emerged from the earth itself. They were the ones who established the sacred institution of kingship in Ireland, dividing the island into 5 provinces, a political structure that would echo for centuries. Their reign, however, was destined to be short-lived. They were soon challenged by the arrival of the Tuatha Dé Danann, the people of the goddess Danu. These were not mere mortals. They were a race of divine beings who descended from the sky in a mist, bringing with them 4 legendary treasures: the Spear of Lug, the Sword of Nuada, the Cauldron of the Dagda, and the Stone of Fal. They were masters of magic, art, and science, and in the first battle of Mag Tuaird, they defeated the Fir Bolg and claimed the island. But their own greatest trial was yet to come, a final confrontation with their ancient foes, the Fomorians. The Tuatha Dé Danann's rule seemed absolute until the last wave appeared on the horizon. These were the Milesians, the sons of Mil, the ancestors of the Gaels, the modern Irish people. When they landed, they met 3 goddesses of the Tuatha Dé Danann, who demanded that the Milesians return to their ships and sail a distance of 9 waves from the shore. The Milesians complied, but as they did, the Danann sorcerers raised a magical storm to destroy their fleet. The poet Amergin, a Milesian leader, calmed the winds with a powerful verse. The Milesians landed again and fought the Tuatha Dé Danann, ultimately achieving victory. In the ensuing treaty, the island was divided. The Milesians took the world above the ground, and the defeated Tuatha Dé Danann were forced to retreat below the surface into the hollow hills and ancient burial mounds known as the Shia. There they became the Dinas Shia, the people of the mounds, the fairies of Irish folklore, forever living just beyond the sight of the humans who now ruled the land they had once called their own. Far to the north, in the chilled mists of Finnish mythology, creation unfolds not through battle or sacrifice, but through patient waiting and a single, fragile accident. The Kalevala, the national epic, tells of Ilmater, the air maiden, a spirit who grew tired of the empty, celestial heights. She descended from the vault of the sky and floated for centuries upon the formless, primal sea, a solitary figure in a world of water and wind. One day, a great eagle, searching for a place to nest, spotted the lonely goddess. Seeing her knee raised above the waves, the bird mistook it for a solid hillock and landed there, building its nest and laying 6 eggs of iron and a 7th made of gleaming gold. For 3 days, Ilmater held perfectly still, a living island for the mother bird. But on the 3rd day, a sudden, irresistible shudder ran through her body, a spasm of movement that dislodged the nest. The eggs tumbled from her knee, crashing down into the rolling waves below. They did not sink, instead they shattered, and from their broken pieces the universe was assembled. The lower half of the great golden eggshell curled upwards to form the arching dome of the heavens. The upper half settled beneath to become the solid foundation of the earth. The brilliant, radiant yolk was cast high to become the sun, while the shimmering egg white rose as the pale, gentle moon. Every tiny fragment of the scattered shell was caught in the sky, glittering as the stars of the night. With the raw materials of the cosmos now in place, Ilmater began her true work as a shaper. She traced the coastlines with her fingers, carving out the bays and inlets. She smoothed the seabeds and piled up the mountains, giving the newborn world its form and texture. And from this act of creation, a new life grew within her. She carried the child for 700 years until the wise old sage Vainamarinen was finally born, an ancient man from the moment of his birth, emerging not as an infant but as a powerful singer and poet. He became the central culture hero of the Kalevala, a being whose magical songs could shape reality itself, his very existence a testament to a world born from stillness, chance, and the enduring patience of its first mother. The gods grew weary of their own creation. In the ancient Sumerian city of Eridu, a story was told that expands upon the world born from Tiamat's body, revealing a troubling relationship between the divine and the mortals they made. This is the Eridu Genesis, a tale that begins with purpose but spirals into divine regret. After the great cosmic battles, the gods had fashioned humanity from clay, but with a very specific intention. We were created to be their laborers, to till the fields, to dig the irrigation canals, and to bear the toil of the earth so the gods could live in comfort. For a time, this arrangement worked. Cities were built and the land flourished under human care. Yet as humanity multiplied, their noise became a constant, rising clamor. The din of their settlements, the bustle of their markets, the sheer volume of their existence began to disturb the slumber of the gods, particularly the chief god Enlil. He could find no rest, no peace from the endless commotion rising from the world below. Enlil's annoyance curdled into a grim resolve. He decided that humanity, this noisy, overpopulated project, was a failed experiment. He convened the divine assembly and persuaded them to agree to a final solution, a series of escalating disasters designed to wipe the earth clean. First, he sent a terrible plague. Then a devastating drought, but each time the clever god Enki, who held a fondness for the humans he had helped create, found a way to intervene. He would whisper to a righteous priest king, instructing him on how to pray and make offerings to appease the specific god in charge of the calamity, and the disaster would be stayed. Enlil, furious that his plans were being thwarted, realized a more absolute measure was required. He demanded the gods all swear a binding oath to unleash a weapon from which there could be no recovery, a great flood that would cover the entire earth and silence humanity forever. Enki was trapped by this oath, but his cleverness knew no bounds. Instead of speaking directly to the righteous King Ziusudra, he went to the reed wall of the king's hut. He did not break his oath to the gods, but he spoke to the wall itself, knowing Ziusudra was listening on the other side. His words were a warning and a set of precise instructions. "Tear down your house," he said, "and build a great, sturdy boat from its reeds. Abandon your possessions and instead save your life. Take aboard the seed of all living creatures, the animals that sustain you." Ziusudra did not hesitate. He built the massive cube-shaped vessel, sealed it with bitumen, and loaded it with his family and all the animals as the storm clouds gathered. Then the deluge came. For 7 days and 7 nights, a tempest raged so fiercely that even the gods themselves grew terrified, huddling in the highest heaven as they watched the destruction they had unleashed. When the storm finally subsided and the waters receded, Ziusudra's boat came to rest on a mountaintop. He opened a window and released a dove, then a swallow, to see if they would find land. When a released raven did not return, he knew the earth was dry. he emerged and made a sacrificial offering to the gods. The sweet smell of the roasting meat reached the heavens, and the gods, who had been starving without anyone to feed them, swarmed around the offering like flies. Enlil, however, was enraged to see survivors, but Enki defended his actions, arguing that the punishment should fit the crime, and that wiping out all of humanity was an overreaction. A compromise was reached. The gods granted Ziusudra and his wife immortality, but they also instituted new measures to control human population, introducing infertility, infant mortality, and other hardships to prevent their numbers from ever becoming a nuisance again. This ancient story presents a world where humanity lives on borrowed time, saved not by divine love, but by the cleverness of one sympathetic god and the enduring need of the gods themselves for the offerings only humans can provide. Even the cosmos itself can experience the pangs of birth. In ancient Armenia, poets sang of a time when the heavens and the earth were in labor. Their cosmic straining focused on a single, unlikely object, a crimson reed rising from the primal sea. This was not a gentle growth, but a tumultuous, fiery process. From the very heart of the laboring reed, a thick column of smoke first began to pour forth. Then from the heart of that swirling smoke, a brilliant flame erupted, a beacon of pure, untamed energy in the primordial waters. And from the heart of that living flame, a young boy came running forth. This was the god Vahan, and his arrival was as dramatic as his nature. His hair was a raging inferno, and his very eyes were not just like suns, they were suns blazing with celestial light and vision. He was the god of fire, of war, and of ultimate victory, a dynamic and unstoppable force born directly from the raw elements of the universe. This powerful fragment of myth, preserved in the lyrics of an old song, gives us a precious glimpse into a very ancient Indo-European tradition. Unlike a god who creates from a distance, Vahan is creation itself in motion, a personification of the transformative and destructive power of fire, emerging not from a divine parent's will, but from the fundamental labor of existence. This act of breathing life into mud connects deeply with another story from the frost-kissed forests of Eastern Europe. In the Slavic traditions of Poland, the world began not with a cosmic egg or a giant's body, but with a simple command given over a boundless, empty sea. A supreme god, often called Swarog or Rod, looked out upon the endless grey waters. He was not alone, for with him was a cunning devil, a figure of chaos and mischief. Their gaze fell upon a single water bird, a diver, skimming the surface of the primordial ocean. The god spoke to the bird, commanding it to plunge into the abyss and bring back a single piece of earth from the bottom. The bird obeyed, disappearing into the dark, cold depths for what seemed like an age. It finally surfaced, exhausted, with a tiny bit of mud clutched in its beak. The god took this precious speck of solid matter into his hands. Then he breathed his sacred breath upon it. As his warmth and spirit touched the mud, it began to swell. It grew and expanded, stretching out in all directions until it formed the vast, flat expanse of the earth. The land was born from that one divine breath. But the devil, watching this miracle, was filled with envy and a desire to claim his own part in creation. When the bird had brought up the mud, the devil had secretly hidden a small piece inside his own mouth. Now, as the god made land spread out in perfect, fertile plains, the devil spat out his stolen portion, but his breath was not sacred, it was corrupt. The mud he expelled did not merge smoothly with the rest. Instead, it clumped and buckled, creating the jagged mountains, the treacherous hills, and the deep, muddy swamps that break the perfect flatness of the world. This myth offers a beautifully simple explanation for the very landscape we see, a world shaped by both divine order and chaotic mischief, a partnership that gave the earth both its nourishing fields and its challenging wilderness. Deep within the profound darkness of a Hawaiian night, a different kind of creation was unfolding. This was the Po, a time of potential where life began not with a single act, but as a slow, deliberate unfurling, meticulously recorded in the sacred chant known as the Cumulippo. This epic genealogy, over 2,000 lines long, does not speak of gods carving the world from a corpse or speaking it into being. Instead, it describes a process that feels almost like a biological evolution, a family tree for the entire cosmos. The chant begins in utter blackness, a deep, generative night where the very first life stirs in the warm, surrounding sea. And what is the very first ancestor, the root of this immense family? It is the coral polyp, the pucca. This tiny, simple organism, a living stone that builds entire islands from its own body, is named as the primordial source. From this humble beginning, the Cumulippo charts a sequential birth of existence. The chant moves with a patient, rhythmic cadence, listing the emergence of the sea creatures, each generation giving way to the next. It sings of the birth of the plants that would root themselves in the land not yet fully formed. Then come the insects, the flutter of wings, the birds that would eventually fly over the islands, and finally, the land animals and humanity itself. This was not just a story of natural history, it was a political and spiritual document of the highest order. The chant directly connects the alii, the Hawaiian chiefs, back through this unbroken chain of life all the way to the coral polyp. Their sacred right to rule, their mana, was rooted in this most ancient of ancestries. They were not merely rulers appointed by gods, they were literal relatives of the land and sea, the highest human expression of a creation that began in the dark, warm waters with a simple foundational polyp. With a world built from the corpse of a giant, the Norse cosmos still lacked its most vital inhabitants. The gods Odin, Vili, and Vi had sculpted mountains from bones and oceans from blood, but the realm of Midgard, the middle enclosure, stood silent and empty. One day, the three brothers were walking along the shore of this newly formed world, where the sea met the land they had created. There, washed up by the tide, they found two pieces of driftwood. They were not mere scraps, but logs with a distinct and promising shape. One was from an ash tree, strong and resilient. The other was from an elm tree, graceful and supple. The gods saw potential in these inert forms, a raw material for a new kind of life. They decided then and there to fashion these logs into the first people. This was not an act of laborious carving, but a collaborative bestowal of divine gifts. Odin, the All-Father, leaned over the two wooden figures first. He breathed his own breath into them, a sacred wind that filled their lungs and gave them spirit and life itself. They were no longer wood, but living beings. Then his brother Vili stepped forward. He gifted them with intelligence, the capacity to think and to reason, and with movement, the ability to act upon their thoughts and walk freely through their world. Finally, the third brother, Vi, completed the work. He gave them the five senses, the gifts of sight to behold the world, hearing to listen to its sounds, and most importantly, the power of speech, so they could name their world and share their thoughts with one another. The gods named the man Ask, which means ash, and the woman Imbla, which means elm. From this single pair, born from the meeting of seawood and divine breath, all of humanity is said to be descended. With Ask and Imbla placed safely within the protective walls of Midgard, the Norse cosmic order was finally complete. The gods had their own realm in Asgard, the giants dwelled in Jotunheim, and now humanity had a home, forever connected to the gods who gave them life, yet separate, embarking on their own saga under the watchful eyes of the deities who formed them from nothing more than wood and will. But the reign of Zeus brought with it a new kind of creation, one marked not by triumph, but by a slow and sorrowful decline. After the cosmos was secured from the Titans, the Olympian gods began to fashion humanity, and according to the poet Hesiod, they did so 5 separate times, each attempt producing a race more flawed than the last. This is the myth of the 5 ages of man, a poignant explanation for the hardship and injustice that defines our world. The first race was the Golden Race, created during the rule of Cronus. They lived like gods, their hearts free from sorrow and toil. The earth itself provided for them in endless abundance, and they passed their days in peaceful tranquility. When their time ended, they did not suffer a painful death, but simply fell into a gentle sleep. Their spirits became benevolent guardians of the earth, watching over humanity as pure and blessed deities. Next came the Silver Race, a generation fashioned by the Olympians. They were childish and impious, refusing to honor the gods with proper sacrifices. They remained at their mother's sides for 100 years, and their adulthood was brief and marked by reckless violence. Zeus, angered by their lack of reverence, eventually buried them in the earth, and their spirits became the underworld's blessed dead. The gods then created the Bronze Race, a people forged from ash trees. They were terrifying in their strength and passion, their hearts consumed by the grim arts of war. Their armor, their weapons, even their very homes were all crafted from bronze. They lived only for conflict, and their hands were turned against one another until they had utterly destroyed themselves, descending into the cold, nameless halls of Hades without leaving any trace of their violent civilization. Zeus then made a fourth race, the race of heroes, which breaks the metallic sequence. These were the noble, semi-divine warriors of legend, the men who fought at Thebes and Troy. Their age was one of epic quests and great deeds, but it too ended in war and bloodshed. After their deaths, they were granted a special paradise, the Isles of the Blessed, where they live in eternal peace under the rule of Cronus. Finally, we come to the fifth and current race, the race of iron. This is our age, a time of unending labor and ceaseless strife. By day, we exhaust ourselves with work and worry, and by night we are consumed by care. The bonds between parent and child, between guest and host, are frayed and broken. Envy and slander walk among us, and the gods have all but abandoned the world to its misery. Hesiod foretold a grim future for our race, a time when shame and moral restraint will completely vanish, and the gods will finally withdraw, leaving humanity to its own wretched devices. This powerful myth presents a deeply pessimistic vision, suggesting that our very nature is the product of a cosmic devolution, a long fall from a lost paradise of ease into our present world of struggle. The story of Purusha's sacrifice was not the only time the Hindu gods engaged in a cosmic effort to draw forth creation from chaos. Another magnificent myth tells of the Samudra Manthan, the churning of the ocean of milk. The Devas, the gods of order, had grown weak, their power fading. Their eternal rivals, the Asuras, the demons of chaos, were also seeking an advantage. The prize they both sought was Amrita, the nectar of immortality. Realizing that neither side could accomplish this monumental task alone, they made a fragile, temporary truce. Their cooperation itself became the engine of creation. They uprooted the massive mountain Mandara to use as a churning rod. The great serpent Vasuki offered himself to be the churning rope coiled around the mountain's peak. The Devas took hold of Vasuki's head while the Asuras gripped his tail. Then they began to pull back and forth, spinning the mountain with immense force. But the mountain had no foundation, and it began to sink into the soft bed of the cosmic ocean. The entire operation was on the verge of collapse. It was then that Lord Vishnu, the preserver, intervened. He took the form of a colossal tortoise, Kurma, and dived to the bottom of the sea. His immense, unshakable shell became the pivotal base upon which the mountain Mandara could rest and rotate. With this foundation secure, the great churning began in earnest. This was not a gentle process. It was a violent, chaotic, and painful upheaval. As the gods and demons pulled the serpent back and forth, Vasuki suffered terribly, breathing out vast clouds of smoke and poisonous fumes from the exertion. The first substance to emerge from the churning ocean was a deadly poison known as halahala. It was so toxic that its vapors began to spread through the universe, threatening to annihilate all of creation. In a moment of selfless desperation, the god Shiva came forward. He gathered the entire poison into his hands and drank it, holding it in his throat. The venom was so potent it turned his throat blue, earning him the name Nilakantha, the blue-throated one. He absorbed the universe's first and most destructive product to save it, a permanent reminder that creation is inextricably linked with suffering and sacrifice. Only after this act of preservation could the treasures begin to appear. From the churning waters, a succession of divine beings and celestial objects emerged. The divine Kaukamadhenu, who could grant any wish, rose from the depths. The Parijata tree, which would fill the world with its heavenly fragrance, came next. Then emerged the beautiful goddess Lakshmi, the embodiment of prosperity and good fortune, who chose Vishnu as her consort. The moon, Chandra, was pulled from the ocean, followed by the divine elephant Airavata and other celestial creatures. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity of labor, the physician of the gods, Dhanvantari, appeared. He rose from the waves holding the pot of Amrita, the nectar of immortality. The temporary truce shattered instantly. A fierce battle for the pot erupted between the Devas and the Asuras. It was Vishnu once again who ensured the nectar went to the forces of order. He transformed into the enchanting Mohini, a captivating woman who distracted the Asuras and secretly gave the Amrita only to the Devas, restoring their power and ensuring the continued balance of the cosmos. This epic myth presents creation not as a single act but as a continuous, turbulent process. The universe, with all its wonders and its poisons, is the product of a fundamental tension, a necessary cooperation and conflict between opposing forces, churning together upon an unshakable foundation of divine grace. Yet the world Pangu had forged from his own body was a silent and empty masterpiece. For a time, the mountains stood without echo, and the rivers flowed without anyone to behold their beauty. It was the goddess Nuwa who found this magnificent creation profoundly lonely. Wandering the riverbanks, she was struck by a sudden inspiration. Kneeling, she took handfuls of the soft, yellow earth and with great care and artistry began to sculpt a small figure. She shaped it in her own divine image, giving it legs to walk the earth and hands to shape its own destiny. When she was finished, she set the little clay figure down on the ground. To her wonder, it immediately sprang to life, jumping and dancing with joy. It was the first human. Delighted, Nuwa continued her work, fashioning more and more of these figures. She worked with such focus that she soon grew tired. To speed the process, she dipped a rope into the thick mud and flicked it. Wherever the blobs of mud landed, they too transformed into people. The ones she had carefully handcrafted became the nobility and the founders of great families. Those created from the splattered rope became the common people, the vast multitude who would populate the world. She had filled the silence with laughter and conversation, but this idyllic world was not destined to remain peaceful. A terrible war erupted between two powerful gods, Gong Gong and Zhuan-Zhu, battling for supremacy. The conflict was so violent that it shook the very foundations of the cosmos. In his rage and defeat, Gong Gong, the water god, smashed his head against one of the great pillars that held up the sky at Mount Baju. The pillar shattered, the sky tore open, and a section of the celestial dome collapsed towards the earth. The stable order Pangu had died to create was coming undone. The consequences were immediate and catastrophic. A perpetual darkness fell where the sky was broken. Torrential floods poured from the tier, and savage fires erupted from the earth's ruptured core. Fierce beasts emerging from the chaos began to prey upon the terrified humans Nuwa had so lovingly made. Seeing her children suffer, the goddess was moved to act. She would not let her creation perish. She embarked on a monumental task of repair, a mission to mend the very heavens. She journeyed across the world, gathering stones of 5 distinct colors, representing the fundamental elements of the universe. She built a colossal furnace and melted these stones down into a radiant, molten paste. Then, reaching up, she used this divine mortar to carefully patch the gaping hole in the sky, sealing the breach and stopping the devastating floods. Next, she had to address the broken pillar. She hunted and slew a giant, ancient turtle, cutting off its 4 mighty legs. She carried these colossal limbs to the 4 corners of the world. setting them up as new, indestructible pillars to firmly hold the sky aloft, restoring its proper height and stability. Finally, she confronted the remaining chaos on the earth. She subdued the raging fires and tamed the wild floods, and she slew the great black dragon that was terrorizing the people, driving the other fearsome beasts back into the shadows. With order restored, the humans could live in safety once more. Nuwa's story does not end with a single act of creation, but with a continuous, caring act of preservation. It is a powerful reminder that the cosmos is not a machine that runs forever on its own, but a delicate balance that sometimes requires a divine touch, a willing and compassionate repair. After the hollow wooden people were swept away, the gods were left with a profound silence. They gathered once more in the dimness before dawn, determined to finally succeed. They understood now that a being worthy of praise must be made from a substance that was itself sacred, something that held the essence of life. They sent a set of animals, a fox, a coyote, a parrot, and a crow on a vital quest. Their mission was to find Paxil and Kayala, a hidden mythical place known as the Place of Corn. There they discovered the source, white corn and yellow corn growing freely. The animals brought this precious grain back to the gods, who received it with immense joy. This was the key. The divine grandmothers, Ex-Mukane and Ex-Biakok, then took over. They ground the perfect maize into a fine flour, mixing it with water to create a smooth, golden dough. With this sacred paste in their hands, they began to sculpt. They molded the flesh and the form, shaping the first 4 men. These were not the weak mud figures or the heartless wood people. These men, whose names were Balam Quitsi, Balam Akab, Mahukuta, and Ikwi Balam, were magnificent. They possessed intelligence, sight, and immediate understanding. They could see everything from the farthest corners of the earth to the inner workings of the cosmos itself. Their gratitude was immediate and profound. They looked to the sky and gave thanks to their creators, their voices rising in the first true words of worship. But their perfect vision soon became a problem. The gods observed these new beings and grew uneasy. Their knowledge was too vast, their sight too clear. They saw as the gods saw, and in that potential the creators sensed a future rivalry. So Heart of Sky breathed a cloud over their eyes. He did not blind them, but he veiled their cosmic sight, limiting their vision to what was near and immediate. They retained their wisdom and their capacity for gratitude, but the infinite was now hidden from them. To complete their creation, the gods then caused a deep sleep to fall upon the 4 men. As they slept, the creators fashioned 4 beautiful women to stand beside them. Upon waking, the men saw their partners and their hearts were filled with joy. From these 4 original couples, the Quiche Maya people were born. This final, successful creation established an unbreakable bond between humanity and maize. We are not just made from corn, we are sustained by it. Our flesh is its flesh. This myth explains why maize is not just a food, but a sacred relative, a divine gift that connects every person back to that first, perfect moment when the gods finally got it right. In the profound silence before time, the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. A vast, dark, and formless deep stretched into infinity, awaiting a single commanding voice. Then a divine utterance shattered the primordial quiet. Let there be light, and there was light. This was the first act in a meticulously ordered sequence, a cosmic week that would establish the very fabric of reality. On that first day, God did not create the sun or stars, but the fundamental essence of light itself, separating it from the darkness. He called the light day, and the darkness he called night. The universe now had its first rhythm. On the second day, God created a firmament, a vast expanse in the midst of the waters, to separate the waters above from the waters below. He called this expanse heaven, creating the sky that arches over our world. With the third day, God gathered the waters under the heaven into one place, allowing the dry land to appear. He called the land earth, and the gathered waters he called seas. and then, with the earth now prepared, he commanded it to bring forth vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees of every kind. The barren ground suddenly teemed with green, flourishing life. The stage was now set for the celestial bodies. On the fourth day, God created the great lights, the sun to rule the day and the moon to rule the night. He made the stars also, setting them in the firmament to give light upon the earth and to mark the seasons, the days, and the years. The cosmos now had its clock and its map. With the fifth day, God filled the waters and the skies. He created the great sea monsters and every living creature that moves in the sea, and every winged bird of every kind. He blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply, filling the waters and the air with their vibrant, swarming presence." The sixth day began with the creation of the land animals, creatures of every kind, livestock, and everything that creeps on the ground. Finally, God turned to his ultimate work. "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness," he declared. And so, God created humanity, male and female, in his own divine image. He blessed them and gave them dominion over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, and every living thing that moves on the earth. He provided every green plant for their food. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. On the seventh day, with his work of creation finished, God rested. He blessed the seventh day and made it holy, sanctifying a rhythm of work and rest for all of creation that would follow. This vision presents a universe brought into being not through struggle or the body of a slain God, but through the sheer power of spoken command. It is a creation born of absolute will, moving from formless chaos to a perfectly structured world crowned by humanity, fashioned with an intimate and unique connection to the Creator himself. Yet this divine command creating a perfect world stands in stark opposition to a final, secretive tradition. The Gnostic texts, like the secret book of John, present a creation story that is not one of triumphant order but of cosmic tragedy. It begins with a singular, ultimate reality, an invisible, unknowable spirit, a monad so transcendent it is beyond all description. From this perfect source, a series of divine beings called eons emanated in male-female pairs, each one a reflection of the Father's boundless attributes. Together, they formed the pleroma, the fullness of divine light and harmony. The last of these eons was Sophia, whose name means wisdom. In a moment of passionate longing, she desired to know the unknowable Father on her own, to grasp his infinite nature without the consent of her consort. This impulsive act, born from a love that overstepped its bounds, caused a rupture. Her thought, separated from the harmony of the pleroma, congealed into a formless, ignorant substance. From this chaotic energy, she gave birth alone, and what emerged was not a true god, but a monstrous, lion-faced serpent. This was Yaldabaoth, the demiurge. Arrogant and blind, this flawed creator believed he was the only god, utterly ignorant of the true, divine realm above him. In his pride, he declared to his own hastily fashioned angelic hosts, "I am a jealous god, and there is no other god beside me." With this arrogant lie echoing in the void, Yaldabaoth set about building his own kingdom. He ignorantly fashioned the physical cosmos, our entire material world, as a poor, distorted copy of the perfect realms of light he could not perceive. He is the God of Genesis, the one who forms Adam from the dust of the earth, creating a physical prison for humanity. But Sophia's story was not over. Horrified by the arrogant, flawed being she had produced, she repented and prayed for help. The true, invisible spirit responded with grace, sending a comforting power to conceal her within the pleroma so Yaldabaoth could not find her. Yet a piece of her divine essence, her power, had already been stolen by her son and infused into his creation. This is the pivotal twist. When Yaldabaoth and his archons shaped the first human, they used the physical clay of their world, but they breathed into him the spiritual power they had unwittingly taken from Sophia. This act implanted a divine spark within humanity, a sliver of the true, transcendent light trapped inside a material body. The demiurge, realizing he had accidentally given humans a connection to a higher reality he could not control, became furious and jealous. He cast Adam and Eve into the forgetfulness of the material world, hoping the divine spark within them would remain dormant forever. This is why, in the Gnostic reading, the serpent in the Garden of Eden is not a deceiver but a liberator, sent by Sophia to awaken Adam and Eve to the knowledge, the gnosis, of their true divine origin. In this radical vision, human existence is not a fall from grace but an awakening to a tragic truth. We are divine spirits trapped in a world crafted by an ignorant and hostile power. Our entire purpose, our salvation, lies not in worshipping the creator of this world, but in seeking that inner knowledge, that gnosis, which reminds us of our true home in the boundless light. The physical universe is not a gift to be cherished, but a prison from which the soul must escape, shedding the illusions of the material to reunite with the silent, unknowable God from whom we were never truly separated. From the lonely whisper of a divine word to the thunderous clash of warring gods, these stories reveal a stunning truth. Our ancestors, separated by vast oceans and impassable mountains, were dreaming the same dream. The echoes are everywhere. That cosmic egg which held the universe for Pangu and the Dogon's Amma appears again in the Finnish Kalevala, where the world is born from its shattered shell. The primordial waters of Nun in Egypt, the watery abyss of Genesis, and the endless sea beneath the Japanese Bridge of Heaven all speak of a beginning born from a universal, formless ocean. And again we see the world parents, locked in an embrace so tight their children must force them apart, as Rangi and Papa were separated, or as Gaia and Uranus were severed to create space for life. This recurring image of a unified whole being torn to create multiplicity is one of humanity's most profound and shared intuitions. Why this universal obsession with chaos before order? Perhaps because the human mind is a machine for creating patterns. We look at the starry sky and see constellations. We listen to the wind and hear a language. It is our nature to impose structure on randomness, to find a path through the wilderness. These myths are the ultimate expression of that drive. The swirling, undifferentiated chaos is the universe before human consciousness arrived to name it, to chart it, to tell a story about it. The emergence of order is not just the birth of the world, it is the birth of meaning itself, and in that ordering we find our own purpose. Are we like the humans in the Enuma Elish, created to be servants for lazy gods? Or are we the children of Nuwa, lovingly sculpted from earth to fill a silent world with companionship? Are we divine sparks trapped in a material prison, as the Gnostics believed, or the proud stewards of a world given to us by a benevolent creator? These stories are not just about how the world began, they are about why we are here. Even the methods of creation forge a global tapestry. The motif of creation from a divine body is remarkably persistent. The Norse built the world from the corpse of Ymir, the Aztecs fed the sun with the blood of gods, and the Vedic Purusha was sacrificed to become every part of the cosmos. This suggests a deep-seated understanding that life comes from death, that order is sustained by sacrifice, and then there is the humble earth diver, an animal hero who brings the first land from the depths. In the Slavic story, it is a water bird fetching mud for the creator god. In the Yoruba tradition, it is a five-toed hen scratching the earth into existence from a snail shell. This simple, beautiful idea credits the natural world itself as a vital partner in the act of creation. So what do these 30 ancient voices whispering across millennia ultimately tell us? They tell us that the desire to understand our origins is a fundamental part of being human. We are storytellers by nature. Long before we had telescopes or particle accelerators, we had myths. We use the most powerful tool at our disposal, our imagination, to look into the void and ask the biggest questions of all. Where did we come from? Why is there something instead of nothing? The answers are as varied as the cultures that conceived them, yet the questions bind us together. In every corner of the globe, our ancestors gathered under the same stars and dared to tell the story of how it all began. And in listening to their voices, we are not just learning about their world, we are remembering our own endless shared curiosity. From the icy void of Ginnungagap to the sun-drenched reed beds of the Nile, we have witnessed 30 breathtakingly different visions of how it all began. These myths are far more than simple stories told around ancient fires. They are the foundational pillars of entire cultures, each one encoding a unique set of values, a distinct understanding of the cosmos, and the deepest fears and hopes of the people who told them. They explain why we are here, what our purpose might be, and what we owe to the world and to the powers that shaped it. This universal, timeless quest for origins is one of the most profound traits we all share, a deep-seated need to find our place in the grand tapestry of existence. So we leave you with a question to ponder. Which of these ancient stories resonated most deeply with you? Do you hear the echoes of these cosmic themes in our modern scientific understanding of the Big Bang, or in our philosophical debates about consciousness and reality? The conversation does not end here. Share your thoughts and reflections in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this journey across the landscapes of creation, be sure to subscribe for more explorations into history's great